It approved the abolition of the death penalty and agreed that the circumstances attracting death penalty options include where the murder is committed against a prison or police officer or minor or pregnant woman, or it is committed in the course of other serious crimes, or where there is premeditation. In view of the need to retain the deterrent element in the sentencing of murderers, it is expected that the new law will impose lengthy sentences without violating the right to life. The existence of aggravating circumstances may attract life sentences.
This statement by Zimbabwean authorities has been commended by human rights lobby groups as a major step in safeguarding lives. Although the neighboring country carried out its last execution in 2005, death sentences have continued and currently 62 inmates are on death row.
Zimbabwe has taken the right step to ensure that the death penalty is abolished in the country. We are also taking note that the cabinet has given a nod, and we are hoping that Parliament will be able to pass a piece of legislation that will ensure that the death penalty is committed to the dustbins of history. As Amnesty International, we oppose the death penalty in all circumstances, regardless of the nature of the crime. It is not consistent with human rights articles and statutes. It is a violation of fundamental human rights that are provided for in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who was once put on a death row during the struggle for independence from British colonial rule, has been vocal in pushing to end the death penalty. Kylie Khumalo, SABC News.
Dr. Charles Sinkala, International Relations Consultant, joins us now to discuss this. A very good evening to you, Dr. Sinkala. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. We heard Amnesty there say that it's a mark of progress, it's a step in the right direction, that the only thing that will make this complete is if Parliament votes it into law. Can we just put it into context, the history of the death penalty in Zimbabwe and where the country is now? We understand under the law, only 3 crimes are punishable by death. Just take us through that, please.
Yes, thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. It's a pleasure having me once again. We have received with warm hands, in terms of the announcement by Cabinet of Zimbabwe to intend to abolish the death penalty in Zimbabwe, although we have to wait for the processes through Parliament to enact the laws so that it can be effected. But we are very confident to see that the majority, the 3/4 of the government, which is run by the ZANU-PF, are the majority in Parliament, and that will be passed into law. The history of death penalty in Zimbabwe, just like in many other parts of the world, including South Africa, Zambia recently as well, they abolished last year, has been engulfed by the meaningfulness of the deterrence in the name of the death penalty. Yes, the death penalty worked wonderfully when the economical activities was equal for many of the people, and the crime rate at that time was manageable. Now, when you look at a country such as Zimbabwe, a lot of people going through certain hardships that are unbearable. In fact, some of them, they say death is actually better for them than living in certain conditions. So it has lost its meaning in terms of people getting scared that if I commit a capital crime or murder, I will be killed, So in fact, they want to be relieved to get out of this earth. But having said that, studies has also shown that the response in terms of countries where the death penalty is actually being operational has actually never achieved the deterrent effect in terms of, its main purpose.
And I'm going to tread very carefully on this one because I know people will be critical for me asking the question, but I will anyway because it's something that's in the public domain. I mean, according to the process that's been undertaken, it says to serve as a deterrent, people will get lengthy sentences. You spoke about the current administration, and there have been very critical views of ZANU-PF, this administration, as how it's dealt with dissent. Treason is one of the crimes that still falls under the death penalty. And yet we've heard reports, whether one says substantiated or not, of people who have disappeared, dying mysterious deaths because of suspicion of treason. Are there any dangers that the so-called death penalty will exist in unlawful ways?
Well, I think there has been some allegations, as we have seen the political landscape in Zimbabwe hasn't been very well. There has been some allegations which international communities have also proved them that some political opponents has been threatened by death penalties or any other crimes such as one you've mentioned, the treason, just to deter them from participating freely in the political sphere. But, Zimbabwe has transformed, and we're happy that they are discussing in terms of the transformation constitutionalism, which is also being practiced here in South Africa. Many of these constitutions now are transforming instead of being thought-centered, but rather being in a way that how can we make sure that people do not commit certain crimes. And I think as civil societies as well, they have welcomed this effect that, corporal punishment, has actually exacerbated the crimes rather than the deterrent effect that one would expect. But we hope that it has been intended in the way that, it will be executed so that the political landscape shall improve there in Zimbabwe.
And in that vein, let me then go on the other side of the railway. President Emmerson Mnangagwa himself was at some point on death row, and we're told that he has been pushing for an end to death row. Does it speak to a growing betterment environment of human rights in Zimbabwe? And I'm not even talking about abolishing the law, but people who end up on death row because there have been accusations against the judiciary about the types of sentences that have been imposed, and some of them seem to have been politically manipulated.
Correct, Sapiso. You see, we can't forget that Zimbabwe is still under sanctions of human rights violations. And I think a part of the rehabilitation of the country, to respect the human rights has been part of the Declaration of Universal Human Rights, either by the United Nations or the region organization, the SADC bloc, or the AU itself. Has tendered those letters that the death penalty should be one of them, that they must supposed to respect the right to life for each and every citizen, irregardless of what crime they have committed. Economical crimes such as this, has significantly been used in terms of the political polarization, to silence opponents. And you've likely mentioned, this speaks to what is actually happening, especially the human rights activists in Zimbabwe has actually celebrated in terms of what is happening in that country.
So is it my understanding, let me know if it's not correct, that the 63 death row inmates at the moment, are they likely to be resentenced? And what would that resentencing mean? That you may not end up on death rows and you won't incur the death penalty, but you could effectively die in prison?
Well, definitely, as a practicing attorney, law is very, very what should I say, very strict in terms of the application. And, one cannot be charged retrospectively. Or the other way around, that before the law it comes into effect. I mean, those who are on the death penalty, they'll have to find, once it's abolished, then all of them, they won't be able to be executed. And I think if you look at the last execution in 2005, and now when the cabinet has decided, there has been some talks there and there within Zimbabwe and outside the country, not to put those individuals who's been sentenced for death, for the lengthy period, they'll have to, spend time into prison. But, we have seen some resistance as well from within Zimbabwe. I know it is very hard for those who have killed their loved ones, and especially the victims of the surviving victims, who has seen it that, it's a tooth for the tooth, an eye for an eye, and, they have received it in a very bad way, that the death penalty shouldn't be abolished.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us and sharing your thoughts about this, Dr. Charles Sinkala, just speaking about Zimbabwe working towards abolishing the death penalty.